think one of my main reasons for wanting to do the podcast also is just kind of like, yeah, like people think the porn industry is disgusting, but if they had any idea how disgusting Hollywood is, it's like the porn industry is much less sleazy than I think most people think, and mainstream film is much sleazier than most people had any idea.
Hello, welcome to MovieTown. We are at the El Dorado today in Atwater Village, and I'm joined by Molly Lambert,
Hi.
podcast and writer. Molly, thanks so much for
having me. Yeah.
So your current podcast, Jenna World, really gets into Jenna Jameson, kind of one of the biggest names that porn has produced. Kind of the touchstone to then talk about the full history, really, of pornography, especially in the San Fernando Valley. And I think you do seem too like a bit of a chronicler of LA, or very interested in LA. And so did you grow up in LA?
Yeah, I actually grew up in the Valley.
Okay.
So lifelong interest.
And did you, when you were growing up, did you start to get this interest in Hollywood and, adult films did it start there? Because you were...
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, people made so many jokes about, the Valley being sort of the capital of the porn industry, but I just thought it was an interesting thing, People wanted to know why it was there, and went from there, basically.
How did you choose? I mean, I'm interested of Jenna Jameson is the main figure.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's been done about the porn industry in the 70s and, a little bit in the 80s, but I just thought there was kind of an opening to do something about the porn industry in the 90s and the 2000s, which is kind of like the third, possibly final golden age of the industry. And Jenna was just such a huge cultural figure in that time, but she was also kind of the last monocultural porn star in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting just that she crossed over into, being on E! And MTV and obviously, Howard Stern, but I guess that wasn't that unusual for porn stars to be on there. But to be I feel like I, certainly knew the name and stuff without really knowing, this other side of her work, and I think the really interesting thing, that you sort of cover a lot in the podcast, and that, probably relates to or dovetails with my movie interest a little more, is just, pornography and adult films being such a predictor of Hollywood. Do you think that's still true for it, or this period we're in is just too weird to kind of know?
I mean, it's very oversaturated now. That's the main thing that stops there from being sort of a big monocultural star like Jenna. But at the same time, it's yeah, you do totally still have people crossing over. You have Chloe Cherry, who was in a porn parody of Euphoria and then got cast on Euphoria off of that. And she's very classic kind of, porn star who now does horror films and indie films. And so, I think it's just taking porn as kind of a low budget film industry, kind of comparable to other types of low budget films. There's a lot of...
Certainly Simon Rex comes to mind. I don't know how big of a name he was in porn.
Well, he wasn't really in porn.
Okay.
He just made a solo video.
Oh, okay. To show himself off.
Yeah, but I mean, it is kind of they're within low budget filmmaking. It is
When
porn,
Soderbergh
horror.
had that movie, The Girlfriend Experience.
Yeah, that was Sasha Grey, who was also kind of
really
the
kind of a moment.
Yeah, and she's a Twitch streamer now.
Okay.
And a DJ. So
Yeah.
I think now it's more porn careers just tend to be shorter, I think, than, the turnover rate is maybe even faster because it's such an oversaturated market, but, there's still people who get in the industry and stay in the industry.
Yeah.
So,
In just going back to like being from LA, like what were you a big movie goer like growing up?
kind of. I mean, I think people in LA are such movie guys that I don't think of myself as being like a movie person because I'm comparing myself to other people that see movies all the
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I mean, I like movies.
Yeah.
I see movies.
Right. And what do you think, you've had for both Jenna World and the release of your book Double Axe and Pop, you had these pairings with Brain Dead where where they did events and not in conjunction with the release of each of those. And you didn't screen features, but you screened like clips and shorter stuff.
Yeah,
Like, have you been involved much in this like revival cinema scene
just
of like?
like tangentially.
Yeah,
It's more like I know a lot of people who do stuff like that and I like to go support them and
yeah,
see their stuff. And yeah, our friends who do Hollywood entertainment put on both of those shows. And so, yeah, I like kind of, I guess you'd call it like trash
right,
media.
yeah,
But I also just think, it's good to like look at stuff that people consider kind of low culture and reassess it on its own terms. Because a lot of stuff that people consider high culture is garbage.
yeah. What is your sense of like this like moment in the last few years of revival cinema where in micro cinemas where it just seems like there's just so many, I even keep discovering, like, do you have a read or like?
Well, I think in LA, there's always kind of people in LA love this kind of like genre trash.
Yeah,
And I'm definitely no exception. So I think there are just people who like to kind of look at stuff that maybe other people don't take seriously in a more serious way. And so there's been a lot of people showing adult films lately,
yeah,
here and in New York that are, kind of just taking them on their own terms as films,
right,
as, auteur filmmakers and stars and stuff like that. And it is like, the podcast is really about how at every point it kind of reflects what's going on in Hollywood.
yeah.
And so as Hollywood itself also kind of is collapsing now, it is interesting to look at how that was happening in porn right before.
Yeah. No, I even, brought or, you're talking about like just these movies showing, I'm guessing you saw like the Eros month,
Yeah, yeah.
Ev, that is showing they were showing some like I would say more real, porn, and then a lot of kind of more
Sex comedies, yeah.
comedy, TNA. Although I went to the first night of this for a nurse's triple feature, and I was really surprised by how serious the movies were. I stayed for two of the movies, the student nurses and private duty nurses, and they're both about like like new nurses about to hit the hospitals and work, and each of them in each group has like their social like issue plot line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, in 70s adult films are kind of like 70s movies,
Yeah.
a lot of them are kind of like shaggy and weird and
Yeah.
have these weird performances in them. So, yeah, I've never seen Student Nurses, but I like all those kinds of Roger Corman.
Yeah, yeah. No, these were the Roger Corman and George Armitage directed. One of them who went on, I think he's probably most well known for Grosse Point Blank. But the filmmaking is really interesting
Yeah, that's
in them.
right. It is like sometimes it's just people trying to make a movie and then, that's the hook that allows them to make a movie is that there's some sex in it.
One of the really interesting things I think going here and just what I've liked about kind of the revival scene in this moment versus maybe when I first moved here, was going to film school, was going to the New Bev, It's just right now, it's like the crowds are much more diverse, like in age.
Well, that's
And
good because
yeah,
sometimes you go see a dirty movie at the New
yeah.
Bev and you're like, oh, this is
No, yeah, I was surprised
like a
both how young the crowd was here and how many women were there.
yeah.
Because I'm like, this wouldn't have happened, you know, even 10 or 15 years ago. Like something in the scene has certainly changed where people are coming out for the different kind of movies. And yeah, I don't know, there's something to me too about like the sex comedy specifically in this era of that like 70s especially, where there is an aesthetic going on, but there's also, just a lot of nudity that watching them in the theaters is like a really different and interesting experience. And so different from the sex comedies of like the 90s or whatever that I might have grown up with, that they're maybe a little softer, you know.
Yeah. Then the 80s and 90s ones, or you think the
Well, I think the 70s like tend to, or at least these ones like at the Eros right now, and I think there's a bit more nudity and sex in them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like those 90s movies were just like also gross out
Yeah.
comedies, which was sort of like this combination of horniness and then really off-putting kind of like body fluid comedy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the 70s ones feel a little like innocent in comparison to that, I think.
Well, I don't know. I mean, one of the ones I even recommended that's playing this month, Pretty Maids All in a
Oh, that's
Row.
a crazy
Yeah,
movie.
this Roger
Yeah.
movie
Roger
that
Vadim a real sicko.
oh yeah. And I saw that play at the New Bev like maybe 15 years ago at this QT Fest. Like, I don't know if he had like QT as in Quentin Tarantino. Like, I don't know if he had bought the place yet or was running but he would host this like film fest of his prints. And I saw that there and was just like, this is, crazy. I can't, you kind of can't believe where that movie comes from.
Yeah.
And there does feel like there's a lot, like they were pushing the boundaries more than, some of the, what became like the sex comedies, more mainstream hits. Like, I mean, these movies weren't hits by any means.
Yeah, but honestly, if you watch like Porky's is a crazy movie.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And
I watched it again last year, and yeah, it is kind of like shocking the difference between what you might see now and like that was a huge movie.
yeah, and that was such a big video store movie.
Right.
And the cover always scared the hell out of me
Yeah.
for some reason. It's got this kind of like Argento looking cover with like the eye through the peephole. So it was more just like when I was old enough to rent those movies, I was like, gotta see what's in these crazy looking covers.
Yeah.
But that one kind of lives up to the cover. It is a crazy movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just people were experimenting. That's the thing about porn too, though, is it's just like you can hang any kind of movie on that hook.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and even some of the like gonzo porn stuff that you talked about of like playing around with video when it first
Yeah.
comes out, that I think you probably saw a little bit on like MTV, kind of used maybe some of that stuff before movies and other TV, did. But like, yeah, it's so interesting that, filmmakers in that world like picked up on, oh, you could do really different stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's very like whenever there's a new technology,
Yeah.
then there's like experimenting with the new technology, and porn always gets to the new technology first, and then they get to the experimenting first usually.
Yeah.
And then once people see that's something people are interested in. But yeah, I think especially with video cameras, it was just like the idea of like, oh, you could move around in the space
Yeah.
in a new kind of way. And that it gives it that kind of like immediacy that film doesn't have. I mean, The thing I say about the show is that about Jenna World is that Boogie Nights is about the transition from film to video,
Yeah.
and then Jenna World's about the transition from video to DVD
Yeah.
and then DVD to the internet. So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of like a big untapped era of filmmaking, and just the way there was so much crossover between porn and mainstream culture in that era.
Yeah. Do you think there's any movies from that era, like, for instance, at the Arrow, you know, um, the opening of Missy Beethoven is playing, or like Deep Throat, these movies that still play theatrically and get crowds. Do you think there's movies from that era that could hold up?
Yeah, I mean, we did show a movie at the Jenna World show. We showed Pirates, Triple X, which is
Pirates of the Caribbean?
yeah, and it comes up in the show, but it's the biggest budget porn of all time.
Yeah.
And so I always thought that was funny, that it was like sort of the Heaven's Gate of porn films.
Yeah.
But it was really just it came out right before this kind of technological collapse into the internet, and with piracy and free streaming destroying the porn industry's business model. But Pirates is a crazy movie. It's
Yeah.
very funny. It's got CGI skeletons, like Ray Harryhausen skeletons storming a beach at the end. It knows it's a comedy. I think people talk about porn a lot too, like, oh, the acting is bad and it's funny, but not on purpose. But the acting's pretty good, and a lot of porn is funny on purpose and knows it's funny, knows it's, campy. And so I think, yeah, there's definitely some movies that hold up. And some of those big budget, vivid movies really hold up because, they're just
Like as feature films, you think?
yeah, I mean, we looked at a lot of stuff to show for that show too. We didn't show everything. But there was we found an LA Confidential porn parody that opens with just a complete recreation of the opening of LA Confidential. That's like the newsreel, or it's Dragnet, the cops are here. Um, and then it's a porn with Jenna in it, where she's like a movie star moving out to Hollywood. So, I think like the plot parts of the porn, but still now there's people making porn with plot. It never goes away, really. I saw recently there is a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood parody,
Really?
called Once Upon a Time in Porn Valley, that is like a series basically, because due to the internet, it's like people release things more
Right.
as clips than as full-length films. But that's like a thing on one of the websites, maybe Digital Playground even, that I just thought that was funny. And it's set in 90s Porn Valley.
Yeah.
It's, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it's about the porn industry in the 90s, kind of looking at it as like this peak. So, yeah, I think there's some gems from that era for sure.
And what do you think? What were like the gateways for you to have an interest in going down, this road of
I mean, I always have liked genre, low budget, kind of B movie stuff. I probably,
what?
like Russ Meyer movies were probably the gateway for me. I was really into Russ Meyer movies as like a teen, and especially Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I just think is like a great weird movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, just sort of all the weird stuff you can do in a movie. I just love kind of any kind of attempt to cash in on a trend.
Was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls the one that takes place partly? There's like a junkyard section of it.
No.
I wonder if that was like Super Vixens.
Yeah.
Because I went to a Russ Meyer Fest at American Cinematheque years ago, and I saw Faster Pussycat Kill Kill with one of these later got real gonzo sex comedies, and it was like it was so witty, along with like the crazy sex stuff that
Yeah, I mean,
it really stood out.
all those Russ Meyer movies are fascinating.
Yeah.
And yeah, Doris Wishman, who's a filmmaker who made a bunch of what they're called nudie cuties. She made this movie called Nude on the Moon that, just like a woman filmmaker making really strange sexploitation movies. So yeah, I just always was like a person who gravitated towards the cult section of the
Right.
video store.
And then how did it feel, kind of having those tastes? And then, but a lot of your stuff, certainly at Grantland and some of the podcasts, was kind of covering more mainstream Hollywood movies and TV and music. Was it easy, like, jump between those?
Sure, I mean, it's all one thing,
Yeah.
I think the idea of just like, is it entertaining? My main criteria.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite, like, revival screenings you've seen in LA, like old movies?
Well, one movie I love is Angel.
Okay.
Have you seen Angel?
Well, I know The Box.
You know The Box. It's high school student by day,
Yeah.
streetwalker
I
by
don't
night.
think I've seen it.
It's great.
Yeah.
And that is a movie too that's like the cover makes you think it's gonna be like horrific kind of, and the tagline, but then the movie is like this incredibly charming. It's like, she's a teenage hooker, but she's got this like gang of friends, like outcast Hollywood friends, and
And so it's not like there's no slasher element to it?
there is a slasher element to it, but it's like it's not perverted in a horrible way that you might imagine it would be. It's much more wholesome than you would think. And it has a lot of great, just like Hollywood Boulevard in the 80s
Yeah,
stuff.
no, I mean, I feel like I've certainly seen that programmed out and about.
Yeah, well, that was a movie I went to the New Bev to
Okay.
see that I was like, it's gonna be me and a bunch of other like weird girls who love Angel, and then it was all perverts. Because it was like the star was there, and it was like a couple of the girls who played Angel, because there's a bunch of sequels to Angel,
Right.
and it was totally guys showing up to be like, oh my God, Angel's here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I go see stuff like that. I'm trying to think what else I've seen lately. I go to like Whammy a
Yeah.
lot. I went to Whammy last night for some like experimental video stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, if somebody says, "Oh, you gotta go see this thing," then I'll go see it.
Do you have like being, doing the release nights for your podcast and stuff? Have you ever thought like, oh, I would love to like show a certain movie, like a feature out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we might show some of those Bob Chin movies
Okay.
that I talked about in some of the podcasts, and Bob
Were
Chin.
those like the
Those are the John Holmes
cop,
movies.
like Chinatown one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Johnny Wad movies.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's also one called like Pizza Girls, I think it's called, that's really funny and weird, where it's like a bunch of girls working at a pizza shop and John Holmes is the manager. Uh, they're interesting movies, and I don't know that I want to watch all of them, because, it is sort of like once it gets into the sex stuff, the vibe and the energy in the room sort of
Right.
changes. But
A compilation of some of the best scenes.
yeah. And some of the Johnny Wad movies definitely do like stand up on their own as movies.
And what was Boogie Nights like for you? Did that feel like an important movie being from the Valley, or
Yeah, for
like
sure. Yeah.
what age you saw it? Did it like open you of, oh, this like is an interesting world at all?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, it's just a great movie. And it does capture something about sort of the Valley, and about sort of the porn industry has this kind of blue collar film industry feeling to it that, in that movie they really portray it as like, oh, it's kind of like a family, but it really is kind of like that. It's like when you go to a porn convention, everybody knows each other. Everybody's like hugging 'cause they haven't seen each other in a year. Yeah, I think one of my main reasons for wanting to do the podcast also. It's just kind of like, yeah, you know, like people think the porn industry is disgusting, but if they had any idea how disgusting Hollywood is, you know, it's like the porn industry is much less sleazy than I think most people think, and mainstream film is much sleazier than most people had
Yeah.
any idea. So, you know, trying to put a little respect on the porn industry also just because it's like these are people making movies. These are, you know, there's lights and boom mics and stuff, and people really think of it as like it just happens and it's unmediated completely. But also I was thinking a lot about how similar that is to podcasting, you know, that people really think that people think podcasting just happens
Right. Yeah.
and it takes no effort and, you know, you're just doing it. Um, but yeah, that there's an
Well,
there's a type of work that goes into it.
oh, for sure. Yeah. And especially now, I think it's even maybe a little bit more so when like the Zoom podcasting kind of took over, where people aren't even in the same room as much.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like anything. It's
Yeah.
like some people are good at it naturally, and some people have a lot of money to do it, and it's not interesting at all. So,
Yeah. No, I did like, being reminded because I think I hadn't really read up on it since Boogie Nights came out of like the history it was based on. But I liked that you're kind of, step back of looking at that whole history and realizing like how much of it was like directly like Paul Thomas Anderson took from, real John Holmes or the Bob Chin or there was I forget the name of the adult film star who Julianne Moore kind of
oh yeah, that's based on Veronica Hart,
right, yeah,
who had just like a nightmarish child custody trial because
yeah,
of her being in porn. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about the porn industry is that women direct a lot in
yeah.
it, compared to mainstream because it's considered sort of low culture.
Was it performers who ended up like moving into
Yeah,
directing?
it's like it's just much easier to move from performing into directing, and making porn is kind of like a film school for people.
Yeah,
And because it's not like a big lift of investment for someone to start directing, like everybody starts directing. And so, another thing I like to point out is like the AVN Awards and the XBiz Awards and the Pornhub Awards all have more female nominees for
yeah,
Best Director than the Oscars ever have or will.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, touching on kind of what you're talking about with podcasting, because you were really there. You've kind of I don't know if people think podcasting maybe started 15 years ago or when it was, but you've had a bunch of different kind of podcasts you've been involved in, both, you know, what people might think of as like the conversational podcast, but then also the really storytelling and a little bit narrative. Like with Jenna World, you have um, like performers playing the voices of people that come in, you know, like what have you seen or liked like in that stretch of like that you've been doing podcasts?
Oh, I mean, I like all kinds of podcasts.
Yeah.
I think there's good conversational ones. And again, it's really just dependent on like if you like the people, you'll want to listen to their show. But yeah, my friend Karina Longworth does this podcast.
Yeah.
You Must Remember
Yeah.
This.
Great one. Yeah.
That's a great narrative podcast. And then my other friend Jamie Loftus does these really great narrative podcasts. She did one about Lolita called the Lolita Podcast that kind of looks at the history of Lolita as like an artwork and then also kind of like a lightning rod, cultural lightning rod.
Of both the novel and the film?
Yeah, well, it gets into the
Or
film.
and the 90s film?
Yeah, and like there's like a musical.
Okay.
There's all kinds of stuff. And kind of the real story that Lolita's based on. Um, so, I just thought that was also like, oh, she's doing interesting stuff with the medium.
Yeah.
And yeah, similar to porn, it is like, oh, there's a lot of like ability to experiment because if you don't have a huge cost to kind of get into something. It's, you can try stuff out.
Yeah. What have been some of the movies that like first sparked for you when you think, oh, that was a really great podcast or conversation we had, like back on podcasts you've done? Like,
We did a series on my podcast, Night Call, which was me and my friends Tess Lynch and Emily Yoshida. We did a series that was just like nightmarish 80s puppet movies.
what were those?
Well, it was
Puppet Master?
no, it was like children's movies of the 80s that give you nightmares
Okay.
with like practical effects. So it was like Never Ending Story, Labyrinth, which I'd never seen, which
Oh,
is
really?
terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Just Return to Oz.
Okay.
It was just kind of like this is what they showed to kids before they invented computer
Yeah, actually,
graphics.
Video Archive Cinema Club. Have you ever been to that one in the Vista?
No, I haven't yet.
Yeah, I like their programming a lot, but they did last October. They had like one day of October, I forget, but it was like gateway horror. It
Yeah.
was a lot of like, they showed Return to Oz. It was a lot of like these kind of like interesting, like movies that were a touch too scary.
Yeah.
There's this Jason Robards one, Something Wicked This Week.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah, I tried showing that to my niece. It was too scary.
Yes, terrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did that series as kind of like, hey, this is like children's movies are terrifying. But yeah, that was one. I think we did alien movies at one point. So we did a bunch of like Fire in the Sky and stuff like
Oh,
that.
so yeah, like
Yeah.
real life abduction kind of stuff
Yeah.
versus like aliens.
Yeah, and I'm not like a person who keeps up with like I don't like see all the Oscar nominated movies or anything. In fact, I sort of avoid it because I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to watch a movie and then I'm not going to. But
I mean, I think that is one of the things that I've found that I really like about the revival scene, both in starting this show and like being pickier about kind of the newer movies I see, is just letting myself go from that like feeling that I have to keep up
oh yeah,
because the movies, feel like they're important in the culture now, but 10 years, like it's so interesting because 10 years from now, most of those movies won't, people won't even talk about them or think
yeah,
about them. It'll be different movies. And I kind of like that sense of the revival scene of like, what movies do people like actually stand the test of time and are interesting to revisit for people that aren't just, I mean, yeah, you look back through the last 10 years of like best picture nominations and it's like, what, it's not anything new, but it's certainly since the Oscar pool got bigger, there's even more movies. And it's like, oh, wow, I forgot about like that movie.
yeah. I mean, things that win, people totally forget about
Oh, yeah.
by like the next year. So yeah, I'm very into kind of like I don't want to say crowd pleasing because I like a lot of alienating stuff too, I'm sure. But it's I kind of play by ear, I would say. Like when I look at the calendars of what's showing, I'm like, oh, that looks good. I'll go see that.
Yeah. Any favorites that you think like of the last 5 or 10 years that you think we're gonna see like on the revival scenes, like a prediction of like this movie is gonna hold a bit?
I mean, truly the only movie I saw last year that stayed with me at all was Eddington.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I love that.
and I just loved it. Yeah, it was great. That's my best picture.
Yeah, I would be really interesting to see how much that holds up.
I think about it every day. And I'm like, the world is getting more like Eddington
Yeah.
every single day.
And both anybody who lived through COVID of a certain age, like that movie will always mean something.
Yeah, and I think also I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to see a movie about the COVID era. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's cathartic.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, everybody was so insane.
Yeah.
And then we all were like, let's move on from this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And it's still like so much, I was just thinking about with all this Epstein stuff feels like so long ago to me. And I read that it was like the guy, died in 2019.
Right. And
And
you're like,
and I'm like, I think it's because of, everything is like pre-COVID.
Yeah,
post-COVID a little
time
bit.
has collapsed a little
Yeah.
bit.
And yeah, that was the movie that best kind of caught it for me. And I think it'll be one that like certainly gets its chance to be part of this revival scene and get played again. And like, do you think there's, because the revival thing, it's not just LA certainly that we're seeing it in. Like when I travel, I look up other theaters. I've covered some other theaters. Like it's definitely feeling like it's becoming a bigger thing. Even like AMC, like random AMC theaters will show movies from the 80s and 90s because they've realized like people will come out
Well, I
to
think
these.
if you wanna see a movie with a crowd,
Yeah.
then you want it to be a good movie.
Yeah.
So I think there's always gonna be an audience for people to see, Jurassic Park,
Right.
something that everybody likes and is good.
Yeah.
But, I do think in some ways it's like movies are becoming more of a specialty genre. Um, I don't know that movies are like the main dominating cultural force that they
Yeah.
used to be, because now I would say that's like the internet stuff. So in some ways it feels like movies are sort of, becoming like any other kind of vintage media where, I would like to see more movies that are crazy, but because it costs so much to make a big
Right.
movie, it's like there's a lot of playing it safe.
Yeah. I mean, I do think even AMC often like will charge. I like actually haven't been to like an old movie at one of these AMC things. I think I would rather go see them, obviously at these other theaters around LA. But they tend, I think often they're like $5, and like the theaters around LA are a lot
Well,
less
that's what I wish
expensive.
there was more stuff like that, that was
Yeah.
like $5 movies, because I also think that would just get people to the movies more. I think the other issue is just movies have gotten so expensive
Right.
that it's like you gotta pick and choose, if
Yeah.
movies were $5, see whatever you want all day, then I think more people would be going,
Yeah.
because you gotta compete with, on demand.
Right. Yeah. But I guess whether that's like a model that could be actually sustainable, who knows, or it isn't on a large level, I don't know.
But I think people like people crave the communal
Yeah.
group experience, and so
I mean, that's certainly what I've seen and like about all these, screenings that I've been getting out to is like they all feel very unique. And even to a point where, it's interesting. Like I have been trying to catch up on some of the Oscar movies and like get myself to go out to see them. And it's such a different experience of, okay, this is a good movie, but even going to see something that you might admit is like a bad movie or mediocre movie at like a revival cinema, the experience of it is still so much more entertaining and like interesting. Like I don't ever regret, oh, that I went to any of these movies. Whereas, yeah, some of these other newer movies, it's like, oh, why did I go see
yeah,
what?
totally. Well,
Yeah,
if you're paying $20
yeah,
for an evening, you better be good.
yeah, yeah. And it's just fun to, be around. Yeah, I think one of the things I wonder if we'll see it in some of these bigger theaters. I mean, it was in, we had it with the ArcLight a little bit, and I think it is a small thing of I like somebody to get up there before the show
Yeah,
and
sure.
say what you're gonna see and like have a little intro that like settles everybody into like, okay, this is like a thing we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to a lot of the Cinematic Void screenings
Yeah.
at the Los Feliz
Yeah, I
3,
love those. Yeah.
and
Yeah, the guy Jim Branscombe, like I met him early when I was doing this. And he was one of like the early guests who'd kind of just as I was starting out and didn't have anything. And so yeah, I love those screenings.
yeah, just
What were
like if
some of the
someone if
favorites that you kind of went to there?
I went to they were doing like a Clint Eastwood series, and I went to some of those, and they were all interesting and
Yeah.
good.
Like, which ones would they show? I mean,
They
he has so many films.
God, what was it called? It's not called I wanna say it's called Tightrope, but just like some weird mid-period
Yeah,
Clint Eastwood action movies,
yeah,
before the kind of Imperial era, the Unforgiven era,
yeah,
and yeah, everything was good. I saw uh
The Iger sanction. I feel like that's what
I saw
I see.
Popcorn
Oh
there,
yeah.
which was crazy.
Yeah. I watched that recently because it had played a lot over October. It gets a lot of play in Halloween, like around the horror Halloween stuff. And yeah, had you known of that one before?
No, no. I mean, if somebody says like you got to see this crazy movie, that's the best selling for
Yeah,
me.
that one's so interesting because, like, what I'd heard about it or read, it was like this Jamaican movie, and then and so I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." There's not many like Jamaican produced movies, but it's actually like Hollywood going down to Jamaica
Yeah.
shooting this movie.
Yeah, this
It's
movie that
so
sort of has nothing to do with Jamaica,
right.
but then the exteriors are
Yeah,
clearly in
it's
Jamaica.
like, I mean, maybe they knew the person who owned it's like the pre-film credits, like going to a cheap place to make a movie or something.
Yeah, I mean, I like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, some friends of mine made this movie called Blood Barn that's coming out that actually has Chloe Cherry, who I was just talking about,
Right.
is in it.
Is it getting a
Um,
theatrical release?
yeah, I mean they're premiering it pretty soon.
Okay.
But I saw a screening. It's just a great slasher, like super low budget slasher where they got a barn to shoot in and
Right.
made a weird, crazy low budget horror movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, if someone is like, I want you to see this movie, I will go see it.
Yeah.
But I'm not super like keeping up with what's coming out constantly. But I know I have lots of friends that are and do.
And where are you kind of on the spectrum of, I feel like it was a big thing. Like it's always kind of a big thing that things play on film and that attracts more people are like, there's even this nitrate film festival, American
I'm
Cinematheque now.
I'm so I'm so whatever the opposite of a film snob is. I'm very contrarian. I think digital video looks awesome. When people started screening things digitally, I was like, cool.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's like,
Will you go to like, will you seek out like, because VHS screenings are really popular right now.
yeah, I mean, I just think everything is like on its own turn. Yeah, my friend Jamie Patterson showed that movie Skyscraper the other day. That's an Anna
Right.
Nicole Smith movie. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's like anything. I like anything in its own format. Like, I think it's like I feel the same way about music. It's like, cassettes have their place and
Yeah.
then CDs have their place. But yeah, I mean, I'll watch a movie on my phone. I don't care.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
And we may have touched on it, like, you said Angel or, certainly Eddington. Like, is there a movie though that you think hasn't gotten its due yet? Like that would be you're like, oh, I would like to bring that to a crowd. But I mean, it could be something from 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
well, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, the things I like and get into, it's more just like I'll see something and get really obsessed with it and be like, everyone else needs to watch this so I can talk to them about it. Uh, I just got the Tubi app, so I
Okay.
can watch more things on Tubi. But yeah, I also like,
What like Tubi rabbit holes have you gone?
well, I just watched this movie called Murder Rap that is a documentary about the Biggie and Tupac
Okay.
shootings. That's like this cops kind of like vigilante documentary that was really interesting and also sort of weird and low budget and like has, clearly made by this guy. Um, it's like a documentary about sort of the conspiracies and who killed Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah, I mean, like Tubi is such a weird world because it's this, it actually has some similarities to some of like the porn stuff of like there's these movies being produced out there for low budget that like you had no idea like
Yeah,
how many
totally.
are
Yeah, there's so many, and I love kind of like a weird off-brand documentary that like may or may not be factual.
right.
And Murder Rap was really good. It's mostly this one cop talking about, trying how he came. Basically, it was like there was a theory that's the one, the Nick Broomfield movie, Biggie and Tupac,
Yeah.
sort of puts forward, and this guy is saying like that theory's been debunked, like here's what really happened. And then at the end he goes into like, but the LAPD and like the Vegas cops completely like shut it down because they don't really care what happens and the case is closed as far as they're concerned. So it's like you got taken off the case. So it ends with this kind of 70s downer ending of like, and nothing ever happened to anyone. Or it was like, it just reminded me of Zodiac, kind of. It was like this guy who's been chasing this thing for years, and then it ends in an unsatisfying way. And then he just is like, and I'm making this documentary so people will know what happened, but like everyone involved is dead.
Right.
And then at the end he's like, it's just like LA Confidential, and they like cut to a clip from LA Confidential. And I was like, wow, what a weird takeaway from LA Confidential to be like, I'll be the guy who like manipulates the suspects. Like, like, you know, someone who saw that movie and was like,
it's a real free for
I'll
all.
be just like the crooked cops in LA Confidential. But it is, you know, stuff I'm interested in, which is this kind of like secret world of LA where there's like the overlap between the cops and the gangs and the media and art. So that's
Do you
what
think that'll like remain, that LA will keep being that?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, LA is just like a dense place.
Yeah.
And so some of it too just comes out of me being from LA and being like, oh, people misunderstand LA because there's this image you see of it in the media, and then there's like the real place where people live and work.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I like all kinds of weird stuff like that. I also like Curtis Hanson a lot, who made LA Confidential. I think some of his other...
What are some of his other movies that you liked a lot?
I like Hand That Rocks the Cradle. It's a great movie. I like a lot of...
Yeah, I saw that a lot growing up.
Yeah, I like that whole genre, kind of domestic thrillers of the 90s. It is also like there used to be a lot of sex in movies, and now there's almost no sex in movies.
It's pretty interesting.
Well, it's because of this kind of like push towards globalization where they're like, the movie got to play around the world, so we can't have anything that'll put anyone off.
Right.
But, you know, I think it's funny they kind of like declared the sex scene dead in a lot of ways, and then this Canadian gay hockey show needed rivalry.
Yeah, I haven't... Well, I was even thinking about, you know, just the turn against it, like Honora winning Best Picture last year, and, you know, puts like sex scenes and nudity really forward in a way that, you know, movies like hadn't, at least movies that were attempting to be somewhat mainstream, like just weren't even touching, you know?
Yeah, so I think also there's a lot of discourse about kind of like how porn affects people as viewers, but I think part of the issue is that porn is really the main place people see sex now.
Yeah.
There's not like an erotic thriller or, you know, other kinds of sexploitation movies.
There's something about that, of seeing, you know, not the porn version, but like in a theater with people that like adds to it. It's almost, you know, it reminds me a little bit of, you know, horror to a degree, of like facing.
Well, it's very similar. It's like you want to, you know, horror and porn are always very closely intertwined.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of similar, like low budget film industries, but also because it's like, you know, people want to see the human body be crazy.
Yeah.
Want to see, and there's always been overlap between that. You know, Marilyn Chambers, who was a famous 70s porn star, is in Cronenberg's Rabid.
Okay.
You know, mainstream directors are always interested in seeing if a porn actor can kind of cross over. Right. And a lot of people who ended up in porn were trying to be mainstream actors. You know, people like Ron Jeremy, who were just like, I'm going to be a comedy actor, and then end up in porn instead. Like
Sylvester Stallone has his little dip in softcore or whatever, and then becomes this guy. I wonder how many people, like how common that really was back then.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common, you know, especially in the 70s. There's a lot of like New York underground filmmaking overlapping with porn.
Yeah. Well, that was really interesting in the podcast, talking about Warhol's stuff of almost being, you know, a little bit of a start of kind of American, film porn.
Yeah, well, it was, they were doing stuff in Europe, and
Right.
American filmmakers were like, why can't we do that here? And they were showing a lot of stuff that was erotic filmmaking under the auspices of like, well, it's Swedish, and
Right.
we all know what those Swedes are like, but it was also just like they had less hangups about it in Europe, and so, I think it was briefly kind of considered like an aesthete's delight to see movies that had, treat adult issues seriously. But yeah, the Warhol movies are like very unsexy, and
Yeah, I guess that's the difference.
yeah, but like it's I love Showgirls. Showgirls is a movie I always loved. So I'm also interested in things that are like very sexual but very unsexy,
Yeah.
like Showgirls, which is like a very sexual but not sexy movie
Yeah.
that's really about kind of, sexual commerce,
Yeah.
and like sex in America as commerce. So yeah, it's a weird time now too, because we're facing a lot of kind of new censorship stuff is happening that is terrifying. And, that's kind of where the podcast ends, is like now there's a bunch of scary. Yeah, that, I thought the podcast was going to end with like, and now porn is legal and everybody can watch it. And, it's more popular than it's ever been, even if nobody can make money off of it in the same way they used to.
Yeah.
But then it ended up ending with like, oh, the right wing, it's part of Project 2025 that they're trying to ban porn again. And they're being pretty successful.
But I have seen this weird shift. I mean, I think it is kind of just these waves of, generations of even just, me seeing how, like, what people expose their kids to now. I find like surprisingly, parents just much more controlling or worried about, part of that is the internet, that there's everything. Whereas, I feel like growing up, most kids like kind of saw, while not porn, certainly saw a lot of like sex in movies, whether it was like erotic thrillers or risky business or something that, they had access to in one way or another. But now I, maybe that was just people, coming from 60s counterculture. And then they
I mean,
raised
I
their
think
kids.
that era too of like having limited access to stuff was probably more exciting for people. The thing is now it's just like now you can see anything, and that makes it less exciting.
Yeah.
Some of my interest came out of that. There was always like the cordoned off adult section in the video store that made it seem interesting because you couldn't go in there if you're a kid. You're like, oh, I wonder what's happening in there. Whereas when you actually see it, you're sort of like, oh, okay. This isn't as
These big boxes.
yeah, or just like it isn't as exciting as my fantasy of it
Right,
might have
for
been. But I do think it's like I understand not wanting your kids to see that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of stuff too where you see people being like, well, kids are very like anti-sex in movies and anti-sex in media. But I'm like, well, what would you say if you were a kid and that was the survey? Like, we might just, yeah, no, of course, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's always, in the sex comedies episode, we talk a lot about how there's always this kind of like revival of sex comedies as a low budget filmmaking device. So I do wonder if like there'll be another wave of sex comedies. Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you think the last wave was? Was it the gross out?
Yeah, it was American Pie.
2000s?
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's Something About Mary.
Okay.
That whole era.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's been something in even 2010s or 2020s that like jumps out.
Yeah, I think that was the big
Yeah.
era.
Yeah.
But again, I think it can always come back. You never know.
Yeah, I'd love to see it come back.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if some of those, I mean, I think American Pie gets played certainly on the revival scene, and there's Something About Mary. I wonder if there's like, I'll be interested to see if I notice like other kind of like smaller ones from that period.
I'm sure somebody's like, you gotta show Van Wilder or whatever, but
Yeah.
you know, I do think like sex comedies are so tied to kind of the video era
Or
that
what is that Ryan Reynolds one about the restaurant staff? Wait.
oh yeah, a lot of Ryan Reynolds is in a lot of sex
Yeah.
comedies, honestly.
Oh, what's the, I'm interested too, not just like the revival stuff, but there's like, there's so much stuff in LA that's interesting out there. Like you have this jazz roulette night. Like, do you see yourself doing more and more of that, like in-person stuff or like podcasting? Like, how do you think all
Oh, I
that
think
goes
it's all,
together?
I think it all goes together. I
Yeah.
think it's fun to do podcasting and then it's fun to bring it to an audience.
Right.
And yeah, I do think, as with like movies, there's just like a communal element to stuff that makes it more fun.
Yeah.
That is part of what's fun about living here.
Yeah. Well, Molly, thanks so much
Cool.
for
Thank you so
coming
much
on
for having me.
MovieTown. This
Yeah.
is great. I'll see you out at some screenings.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on MovieTown.
Thank you.